Hello, Alabama fans, and welcome to the BamaOnLine.com Big Show. I'm Tim Watts, the publisher, and with me is Charlie Potter, team coverage extraordinaire, branching into basketball and football simultaneously. He's staying very busy. And a quick reminder, the Bama Online Big Show is the only show where you get all six of us on the same show discussing different topics. Blake Byler will be coming on with me and Charlie in a few minutes. He's a young team guy that does a great job. Jimmy Stein will be joining us with Andrew Bone, the recruiting editor. Joseph Hastings will not be here today. He's checking, he has a dental appointment, and he's handling that. So, worse for wear for Joseph. But, Charlie Potter, welcome to the show. Not a hard weekend from a football perspective. Saw a lot of guys play in the Mercer game. It had a good vibe to it from the kickoff to the end.
Yeah, I think anytime that you can score like that, get a lot of guys in the game, and then escape the game with no significant injuries, it's a huge upside weekend. And Alabama did just that. They gave up a touchdown. Hell, it might have been Mercer's play of the year, the one-handed touchdown that they had. I think Deshaun Jones was in coverage, but just a hell of a play by Mercer. And Mercer's a good team. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it, but just overmatched by Alabama. And I think for Kalen DeBoer, it's a good thing to get the offense off the field kind of midway or maybe a little earlier through the third quarter. Get the defense off the field a little later than that, and get a lot of young guys in the game because there were a ton, like you said. I think offensively, counting up the participation chart and PFF's grades, I think they played 49 guys on offense alone.
Wow.
And we saw some walk-ons in the game late. And the cool thing about that is after the game, you have your usual suspects come up from an interview standpoint, but they're really just kind of gushing over the fact that those walk-ons and those scout team players got an opportunity to get on the field because that's rare. It doesn't happen all the time. Even in these games, this weekend of the year, this part of the year, you're not always guaranteed to get walk-ons in the game. So to be able to do that, I think is really nice. And again, just a big win and a weekend when you get out of it fully healthy and get ready for these last two games.
Well, you mentioned the Mercer touchdown. Apparently, Whit Neubauer was a huge Alabama fan, the Mercer quarterback who started third team and worked his way up. They had a big show of him sleeping in Bama onesies when he was a kid. And apparently, his dad's a member of BOL, we found
Oh,
out during the show. Yeah, that was going while you were on the team covers. But yeah, I mean, the one thing that stood out to me, because he was a personal favorite of mine in the recruiting process, was Robbie Oots' touchdown. I mean, Robbie's a guy that was recruited workhorse. Nobody really talked about him. We knew what he was going to be, kind of that H-back, come in, be that extra blocker. To see him get a touchdown, because during the recruiting process, he had to drive down because everything was closed. He had to drive down with his dad, no coaches on campus, absolutely avoiding him like the plague or avoiding him like COVID. But they came down and did an unofficial visit from South Carolina. So big moment. I think his teammates recognized that as well.
yeah, Robbie's you don't have favorites really covering the team, but these tight ends, both he and CJ Dupree, have been really great to us just in terms of answering our questions, being as happy as they can be, I guess, to come up and talk. And yeah, to see him get that long touchdown catch was nice to see. I think it was a career long just in terms of, or career high in terms of um receiving yards in the game. It happened on one play, big touchdown to a guy that usually isn't a downfield target. And you could tell he was excited about it after the game. But I think more than anything is, Robbie can tell that these games are starting to wind down for him. He's in his last year of eligibility, and he was actually the senior that spoke to the team on Friday night. Kalen DeBoer kind of does that thing where he'll bring up a senior and they'll have kind of a message to the team the night before a game. And it was Robbie Utes this week, and that was really fitting given the way that he played. And he talked about not taking this for granted. The days are long, but the years are short, and that's really poignant, I think, this time of year because you're getting a lot of these young guys in the games, and they're making an impact. Hell, even before you're putting the reserves in late. And I think he just had that message to his teammates of enjoy this time, get to know your teammates. You're going to forge some friendships and relationships that you're going to have the rest of your life. And I think for Robbie, he really appreciates everything that he's been given from an Alabama standpoint. And For him to be able to score like that's just is really special because he's a guy, like you said, he does a lot of the dirty work. He's going to do a lot of things that don't show up unless guys like Cole Kubelik, who's kind of a sicko for those offensive linemen and blockers, posted on social media. It's
Yeah, absolutely.
a lot of those behind the scenes plays that are
Yeah.
huge for success. So
Yeah.
good to see a guy like Robbie get rewarded like that with a big touchdown.
Tell you what does show up is his mustache. Fantastic. 10 out of
and
10,
mullet
right?
and mullet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he is that a perm? Is that a perm mullet?
I don't want to
Looks
ask.
Yeah, you don't want to. We ought to make Blake. We're going to make Blake wear that in season 2.
Okay.
That's going to be the official Blake do. Going to Oklahoma. First, I mean, it's kind of an interesting game when we saw the schedule. I know you look for new places to go or places you haven't been as much. What are your expectations going to Norman from a media standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I've reached out to our guys over at Sooner Scoop just to kind of get an idea of what to expect from a press box standpoint because it's going to be a little colder in Norman. Heck, there's potential for tornado watch. I think that's kind of a weekly thing for
Yeah,
that part of the country. But no, I'm excited. I'll be the last SEC stadium to tick off the list. I've been to all 16 after this coming weekend, so
pretty awesome.
that's a nice feather to put in your hat. But I really don't know what to expect. Honestly, it's not as big of a stadium as I expected. You would think kind of like a blue blood program like that, it'd be maybe 100,000. I think it's maybe under 80. So it's not a huge venue, but I think it should be, it's still an exciting environment. Oklahoma hasn't had the season that they wanted to have in the first year in the SEC, but I think anytime Alabama rolls into town, when you're still trying to fight for bowl eligibility, there's going to be some people there looking for some big things.
I've noticed that when Alabama plays those kind of like traditional teams like Penn State years back, there's a lot of mutual respect between the two teams. And I know a lot of the Oklahoma fans reading, not actually, I don't actually know any Oklahoma fans. But we do have a great Oklahoma site on 3. Kerry Murdoch and Josh, they do a great job. But they seem very excited just to be playing the game. So I think it's something new for them. Charlie, you mentioned getting out of the Mercer game with no injuries. Give us any injury updates you've got. I know you had a Keon Saab update that wasn't unexpected.
Yeah, I think it was just kind of the inevitable. Kalen DeBoer, when Keon suffered that injury in the Tennessee game, said he was going to be down for a while, but he didn't really have anything definitive to say. And he was asked about him on Monday of this week and said he's going to be out for the year. So that's 3 guys that are out for the year. And that really sucks for those dudes, especially Q Robinson, his last year of
Yeah.
eligibility. I can't say that enough. I feel so bad for him. But with Keon, yeah, it's a big loss, but Ray Hubbard's played really well here of late. I think it was his first start without an interception, so he's got some work to make up. But I think that overall, for really that to be your only 3 injuries to guys that are playing quite a bit is good news because Jaden Roberts didn't play in the Mercer game, but Kalen DeBoer said he could have. I think they were being precautionary with that. As much as they don't want to talk about it, you kind of look at the opponent and realize that, maybe you don't push a guy as hard as you would say if Oklahoma was on the schedule last week. So I think Jaden Roberts getting a week off is probably good for him because he's a guy that's battled through a lot of things this season. But overall, pretty healthy. Maybe a young guy banged up here or there. We didn't see Amari Jefferson. I think he's dealing with something as well. But otherwise, I think when that injury report or injury availability report comes out later this week, Alabama's going to continue to have a pretty short list.
Other things during the game, I know sometimes I pester you, but when like Jaden Roberts goes out, there's a certain portion goes, it's over. You can tell that's an ACL. And then his mom tweets out, he's good to go.
Yeah.
It's so I'm usually asking Charlie in the game, like, hey, is that like, can you see him
Well,
walking on the sideline or,
not to switch to hoops that quickly, because I know we'll talk about that with Blake, but like in the Purdue game, Cliff Amori, he kind of came up limping a little bit, and
Yeah.
he looked to be favoring a leg, but I'm pretty sure he got hit below the belt. So you just
Yeah.
it's context. You got to see how things play out. It can always be something.
Well,
They
you
can
saw
just go to
that.
those injury tents just to take a piss, if we're being honest.
I think the bench instantly saw what happened because the reaction was more like,
Yeah,
"Oh," they don't usually do that on a knee
yeah.
injury. They do that. They do that when they know they've been hitting there. Um, Again, blue collar, right? Keep it simple, game by game. You got 2 games left in a very long season. It's flown by in a lot of ways, but dude, there's been massive drama pretty much every step of the way outside of the opening kickoff in the first game.
Yeah, it's been a long season, but it's kind of crazy to look up and you see Thanksgiving on the calendar next week. It's flown by at the same time. This year feels like it's been 3 years in one, but it also feels like you're in a breakneck speed at this point. Once you get to the season, that always happens. But yeah, I mean, for Alabama, it is just kind of a Kalen DeBoer and these players say it. They probably said it 1,000 times this offseason, but that 1-0 mindset is important because you got to win these last two games to, for the playoff, but also for the SEC championship game. And there's a clear path for Alabama. You need Missouri to win a game. There's some other things that can happen too that can get them to Atlanta, but these players would love to play for an SEC championship. That's still important. And so I think with these two games, Alabama should win. They're going to be favored by, double digits in both. But there's still games that we've seen this Alabama team, they've they haven't played necessarily up to the standard some weeks. And so I think they're trending in the right direction in a lot of ways. Defensively, of course, the offensive line has played well of late. Jalen Milroe is kind of looking back to his old self, but they got to continue to keep their foot on the gas this last 2 weeks because there's a lot at stake and there's a lot that can happen still between now and conference championship weekend.
I think every weekend proves, we say that on the roundtable message board a lot, is that you better enjoy the wins though, and you better appreciate the wins. There's no more 66 to nothing in the SEC, really. I'm sure somebody will win 66 to nothing this week, but overall, you're fighting for every win. I mean, you go back in history, a lot of times we don't know what we think we know. South Carolina's a good football team.
Mm-hmm.
Alabama didn't struggle against some team that was going to go 3-9 or 4-8. They struggled against a very good football team, and won a game where they struggled against a good football team. So I think that's something you look into. Let's bring Blake in. Let me get him in here. Blake.
I'm not wearing a mullet.
It's not. It's not. We're not far off. I mean, if we can get the party in the back, I think we're there, right?
I don't know. It doesn't work for me.
I can't do long hair either. Mine's always starts to curl. Blake, welcome to the show. I was going to tell you, I want both of y'all's opinion or discussion on this during the games. I don't know how much you see on the message board. Certainly, y'all are busy. After the game, y'all are busy. But there's always this tendency when the backups play to overreact. I mean, Richard Young's better than Justice Haynes. Austin Mack's going to beat out Ty Simpson. Why is Rico Scott not starting? All of that based on a few plays. But, man, there were some great plays. Again, I'm not one to overreact to a play, but the Austin Mack to Rico Scott was pretty damn nice, Blake.
Yeah, that was a beautiful ball, beautiful pass. I think we got to see a lot of interesting things. It was nice to be able to see three different quarterbacks not named Jalen Milroe. It was nice that they executed well enough to have the game in control enough to be able to play three different quarterbacks. And I thought we kind of got to see the way each one of them commands the offense a little bit. I think we've seen Ty Simpson's legs a lot over the course of his career. He actually doesn't have a passing touchdown yet in his career, which is really interesting because I think he has 4 or 5 rushing touchdowns. But just his escapability, the way he's able to run, we got to see Dylan Lonergan. I thought he moved the ball. I thought the offense drove decently well with him in the game. And then Austin Mack just showing off the arm talent. Like you can see why Kalen DeBoer is so high on him and why he was a guy that they redshirted at Washington and that they wanted to bring with them to Alabama. The future of this quarterback room is exciting. Just thinking about obviously if Ty Simpson sticks around, like he's the most experienced guy, but you've got talent behind him, not to mention Keelan Russell coming in. So the future is exciting there. And then you just kind of look on down the line, like Richard Young had a really good game. Richard Young has played pretty well in some of this mop-up duty over the past couple of weeks. And that shows that you have running back depth behind Justice Haynes and Jam Miller. Rico Scott made a great catch. It was also a perfectly placed ball from Mack. So I think just on down the line, it's exciting to get to see kind of what the future looks like. I think we kind of get a little bit of this every year because you have that FCS game that's in late November that Alabama typically plays. So you get to see these freshmen after they've had kind of a year to adjust to the system, adjust to college football, kind of immerse themselves in the program. And now with 10, 11 weeks of practices under their belt, now they get to go out and show what they've been working on. So it's always exciting to see that. And it's also cool to see walk-ons get in the game. That's always a great part. And Alabama's veterans, their leaders have been very vocal about how awesome it is for them to see those walk-ons and scout team players get in the game. So that's always really cool.
I always also enjoy a side note y'all miss is when Rico Scott makes the catch that people start yelling about the rankings. So just so y'all know the overreaction that's going on outside the game thread. Charlie Potter again going to Oklahoma, turning to basketball. We got Thanksgiving, we got Christmas, we got signing day, we got the end of the season, we got the Iron Bowl, we got possible college football playoffs, everything that's going on. Let's talk about the college football playoff standings. I saw the rankings came out yesterday. There is so many ways to argue when you look at these rankings. You've got, obviously Texas ahead of Georgia, Bama ahead of Georgia, Ole Miss is behind Georgia, Tennessee's behind Alabama. There's not really a way to get that SEC right, is there?
It's tough, and the playoff rankings come out tonight, so those haven't been updated since the game. But yeah, it's honestly trying to figure out the SEC and where things stand. I didn't know so much math was going to be involved, and it's a lot this time of year because you just talked about everything that we're dealing with. It's like, okay, now we got to do some math and figure some things out because, again, it's crazy that the SEC championship game could be decided based off of the next two games from Missouri. And Missouri's out of the picture now. They play Mississippi State this weekend, and that's a game they should win. But you never know in this league. Mississippi State, I think everyone would agree, is probably the worst team in the league this season. So they should win that one. But if they don't, then they have a game against Arkansas late that could be really telling for the rest of the season. So yeah, it's I know people look to head, but when you have so many teams, kind of locked in there in this log jam, battling for a spot, and not only the conference championship game, but for the playoff, it gets a little crazy. And so you look at, what to expect maybe later tonight from the college football playoff rankings. The AP poll's been a pretty good indicator that Texas should be the top ranked SEC team. They will be until they face Texas A&M in the last week of the season. That's going to be a game that a lot of people have a lot of eyeballs on. But yeah, you have Alabama, you have Georgia, you have Tennessee, you have Ole Miss. You wonder what happens with Texas A&M, these nice two games against Auburn and Texas. There's all these teams just right there kind of in the top 15 that are jockeying for position. And while we talked about how everything's flown by and the season is winding down, it still feels like there's so much in front of us because there's so much still left to be answered. And so it should be a fun final 2 weeks of the season. It's a lot of fun that you have, these conference matchups for Alabama going to Oklahoma and then Auburn coming to town, but just around the league, not even looking at the big picture for the rest of college football, but just in the SEC alone, these last 2 weeks, they could be, it could be photo finish and a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, we come down the stretch where everything's on the line. There is so much good football left to be played. I mean, we've got a huge game this week out of conference, Indiana and Ohio State. But Blake, when you look at this trying to finish, let's go to basketball before I forget. We don't want to forget. I kind of want to forget Friday, right?
Yeah.
I kind of want to forget. Let's talk a little bit. Purdue, not really surprised. I do think the officiating's a little bit lean to Purdue. I know a lot of people are going to yell at me for saying that just a little bit, but that's kind of the home field advantage, right? Is to get calls that are close. I thought the double foul was insanity. But at the end of the day, Blake, I just don't think Alabama played well enough. And I don't think there's enough respect given to what Matt Painter and that Purdue team is.
No, I love that point. Like, absolutely. Purdue has been one of the best programs in the country for the last decade, it feels like. And they've been at the top of college basketball, like top 5 for the past 5 years or so. Like what Matt Painter has done, he's probably one of the most underrated coaches in the country, I think. But really, if you're Alabama, like there's no shame in losing that game. Like that's a Purdue team that's coming off of Final Four. They don't have Zach Edey anymore, but that doesn't mean they're not good. They still have a ton of really good players. And like we just said, Matt Painter's a great coach. They're now a top 10 team. So when you're looking at the resume, you have a loss on the road to a top 10 team. Like that doesn't hurt you. It's good that you went and played that game, honestly, because we found out a lot about Alabama. I thought early on that they you could tell that it was their first road game. I thought there were a little bit of jitters just across the board, whether it was offensively, defensively, whatever. I think Nate Oates is still figuring out what kind of lineups to use. I think even despite all of that, though, Alabama had a 6-point lead in the second half after not shooting the ball particularly well. And just overall, I didn't think they didn't shoot the ball well, didn't play super great, but you still had a lead in the second half. From there, Purdue went on that 13-0 run, and you just kind of felt like after that, like, oh, the Mackey Arena crowd's into it. They just went on this massive run. It kind of felt a little bit over. Alabama kept fighting, but there was really no coming back from that. To that point. But I think Mark Sears needs to be better. He was, I think, 1 for 6 from the 3-point line, and we know he will be better. He's been Alabama's most consistent player for a really long time now, so that's not something I'm particularly worried about. They figured out a lot of stuff that they can work on, whether it's defensively, whether it's movement offensively. It's good that you play that game like that. The loss doesn't hurt you from a resume perspective. All you can do, it's like a no risk, all reward game unless you get beat by 30, which they didn't. They were in it. They played valiantly. It was a good effort. And now you move on and you've got 6 more games in a row of opportunities to still secure really good wins for the resume, starting with the Illinois game tomorrow.
Charlie, I think perception's everything. Like my buddy said, you can't lose to Purdue. And then I turned around and said, so they lost to the number 6 ranked team on the road. Is that bad? He said, well, now that you say they're number 6. And I said, well, like, I'm not sure why you thought number 13 wasn't good. But again, Charlie, the little things I'm seeing is like, Blake mentioned Mark Sears. He's not going to go 1 for 6. A little bit of me wonders if he's not trying to facilitate a little bit more with that NBA feedback of being a lead guard. As opposed to, going out and getting his, which I think will come later in the year. But also you've got Jaron and Aiden. They're a little bit of slumps. Jaron just looks kind of like he's forced into that 3 and not comfortable yet.
Yeah, I wonder how much longer that'll continue because, Nate's kind of worked through the lineups a little bit and tweaked them here and there. And we've seen Jaron Stevenson at the 3 and Grant Nelson at the 4 to start some games. And yeah, I mean, Jaron is a guy, I think he was 0 for 4 in the game, 0 points. He played 14 minutes. And so you wonder if guys like Darion Reed, if he starts to eat up a little bit more of those, if maybe you play a little smaller and have, Sears and Philon and Reitzel in the game or add Holloway into that mix. And then you're probably going to get Chris Youngblood back here sooner than later. And so where does he factor in? Does he eat up some of those minutes? So yeah, it's, I think for some of these guys, it is maybe a confidence thing early, and going on the road doesn't help because I think just looking at it from a TV standpoint, we weren't in West Lafayette, but it looked like a pretty raucous road environment. But yeah, I mean, I think, echoing Blake's point, I mean, Purdue's a good team. And you look at it statistically, Alabama out rebounded them. They did some good things. I think you're not going to see the 1 for 6 from Mark Sears, but also I think he had 4 turnovers. So to what you were talking about, Tim, just the facilitator point, he's got some things to clean up. But I thought, if they had been able to hang on to that run, that 6-0 run before the 13-0 run by Purdue, I thought Latrell Reisel did some really good things in the second half. I thought before he got into foul trouble, LeBaron Philon was playing kind of out of his mind. He was playing really well. He's 3 of 4 from 3. So they're bright spots, but there's still plenty of things to clean up. And that's what Nate wants with these games in this early in the season, that you just can't have it carry over into the Illinois game, because that's a game, while the Illini are ranked, I think they're 25th in this week's AP poll. You should be able to win that game at Birmingham and kind of, get back on the horse and, get ready for what is going to be a really tough stretch, coming up here Thanksgiving week.
Yeah, I agree with Youngblood coming back. I'm a huge fan of his game. Another thing he would have helped a lot on there is defense. He is a put his hand on you and defend, just he don't slap the floor. They don't do that anymore. But in theory, he goes all out on defense. Blake, the one thing with Nate that we've seen a lot of is he has shown patience. That's why I'm most curious with Jaron Stevenson. I think Noah Clowney was 0 for 21 to start his 3-point career. So obviously Noah, who, by the way, people who don't follow the NBA, is really doing well in the NBA, finding his place with the Nets. I think he had 6 threes the other night. I know Keon Ellis also went off last night. He was like 6 of 6 at one point. So Bama representing in the NBA. But Blake, you see Nate going to be a little patient because he doesn't want to take away confidence from a guy that's obviously very talented.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with Jaron Stevenson and really with this entire roster, patience is what Nate Oates will have and what the fan base needs to have, because you've got a bunch of really different pieces coming into this roster that still need to gel. I think with Jaron Stevenson, Nate Oates has been trying him at the 3. It hasn't really been working. He's in a slump, but Nate Oates is never going to tell a guy in a slump to stop shooting. He's going to tell a
Yeah.
guy in a slump to keep shooting
Mhm.
because the only way to get out of a slump is to shoot enough to where you start making them. And Nate Oates has been very vocal about how confident he is in Jaren Stevenson's shot. He's been confident in Aiden Holloway's shot. I thought Aiden Holloway actually had a pretty good game against Purdue until Alabama got down, and then the whole team just kind of started jacking up threes to try to get back in the game. But whether it's Stevenson, Holloway, whoever it is, like Oates is still going to have to be experimenting with lineups. And again, that's what these early games are for, because he's going to have to figure out who plays well with who, and what spots guys are really comfortable in. Like I thought Grant Nelson, personally, I thought he played the 5 a little too much against Purdue because Trey Kaufman-Renn was dominating in one-on-one post-ups, but you kind of had to work around that because Cliff was in either dealing with a little injury or he was in foul trouble. So whenever he was out of the game, he went away from Aiden Sherrill because Aiden Sherrill is another guy you got to have patience with. That's a 5-star center, but he's a freshman. And Sherrill went in and looked very uncomfortable and picked up 2 fouls in 3 minutes. So Oates didn't really go back to him. So just all in all with this whole team, they've got veteran pieces, but they've also got a lot of young guys. They're still finding their way, and patience is a good word because there's so much talent on this team, and Oates is such a good coach that I have no doubt that it's going to get figured out. It's just going to take some time, especially whenever you're going up against this high-level competition, and you're doing that in order to make yourself better for the future. It's going to pay off. It's just going to take some time and some growing pains early.
Yeah, Charlie, you don't schedule Purdue, Illinois, Houston, Rutgers, UNC, and Creighton and expect, like, guys, if we don't win these 6, I'm going to be upset. I mean, you go into this, give us a final thought on what, I think Alabama fans a little bit, some of them miss that this is pretty much a yearly occurrence. Tough competition. There's going to be some tough loss. There's going to be some losses to teams you probably don't know as good as they are. And then figuring out his rotation. Give us a final thought on that before we go to Blake.
I don't really think that Nate goes into this, wanting to lose these games. I think, he wants to win every one of them, but he schedules these games to test his team, to expose his team, because that's the biggest indicator. Because, look, this offseason, we're guilty of it. Everyone's guilty of it, of hyping up this Alabama team. But what's the best way to get these guys' attention? To play good teams and to get exposed, to get not necessarily embarrassed. I don't think anybody's really going to run Alabama out of the gym, but, to prove to them, hey, we're not a finished product. We've got plenty to work on, using a little Jalen Milroe lingo there. But it's a situation where I think that it can help them moving forward. Hell, we saw it help Alabama last year when it came to the NCAA tournament, playing a Clemson team that people probably were scratching their heads of, why did we lose to this team? Well, came back to be beneficial in the NCAA tournament when Alabama faced them in a must-win game to get to that Final Four. So it's a situation where I think that this scheduling can only help. And I think Nate's sitting there after this Purdue game. He's not happy, but I think he's plenty happy that they have a lot to work on and a lot to point to of, hey, we can get better in these areas. And if we do this, we'll be a lot better off.
Blake, give us one final thought on the upcoming stretch.
Yeah, I think I've seen people, whether it be Twitter or on the board or whatever, kind of not doubting this team, but being down on them, saying like, oh, they believe their own hype, like whatever. That's why they're not playing well. Honestly, I think it's kind of the opposite. I think believing your own hype would be Nate Oates scheduling 7 bye games to open the season, winning them all 100-50 and being ranked number 1 just because you beat up on a bunch of low major teams. Like I think the testing is really good, and I think it's going to pay off. Of course, you want to see them get some wins under their belt, and I think they haven't played so poorly to where I think they're going to go over like 0-6 in these next 6 games. Like I think these are some winnable games, especially tomorrow night's game against Illinois. Like Illinois is a good team; they were picked 4th in the Big Ten. But this is a game that, like, the line's not out yet, but I think Alabama's probably going to be favored by 7 or 8. Like you're going to get a home-like crowd in Birmingham, or you should. Legacy Arena is a great venue. Like I think that's a really good chance for Alabama to take what they learned, what got exposed against Purdue, and now be in front of a home crowd against a high major opponent and kind of put it all together. I think it would be really encouraging to see Alabama get a win against Illinois, because then you feel good going into this Las Vegas tournament stretch where you've got Houston, a really tough team, and then you've got Rutgers, a team with a ton of young talent, You've got a third game who we don't know who it's going to be yet. And then after that, you hit the road and you go play North Carolina. And then that's kind of the same type of game as this Purdue game was. So you've got some winnable games. I think Alabama has the talent to go 6-0 in these next 6 games. That's obviously not going to happen, or it's most likely not going to happen because of how many tough games these are. But they can win a lot of them, and they can learn things in each one of these that's going to help them a lot going forward.
Well, you guys, you can find Charlie Potter and Blake Byler on BamaOnLine.com. And before we let them go, you guys give us a thumbs up and a like. We appreciate the content. Charlie and I, again, never thought we'd be doing this, our duo. We added Blake for the trio, but we appreciate y'all checking in every week for the show. Give us a thumbs up and a like. You'll get the notifications on when we have the show. And again, Charlie Potter and Blake Byler, thank you, and we'll see you on the roundtable.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks.
Why are y'all so somber?
It's raining. It's raining really, really badly here in Europe.
It's raining out. It's raining outside. Relax.
Bone's got a better answer than me.
You're not living. Don't drink.
He's got to. He's got kids.
He has to get. No, that's why he can't. His wife won't let him.
I got enough vices.
We were kind of talking with Blake and them about the reaction. We all see it a little bit more during the season, but seeing some of these guys play was fun, right? Against McNeese State, seeing, because we're all three recruiting guys at heart. We love Alabama. We love college football, but we love the recruiting process. So seeing Rico and Dylan and Ty and on and on and on, those guys getting in there was really fun to watch, Andrew.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. People got mad at me last week because I wrote this story about 5 guys that we wanted to see more of during the weekend because we felt like Alabama was going to go in there and dominate against Mercer and give these guys an opportunity. You need that game during the season to give a lot of these young guys some confidence, and and also gives the Alabama coaches a little bit of an evaluation because they get to watch these guys. What's the future going to be like? Next season. Who's some guys going into the spring that you can, maybe get some more attention to. But man, it was awesome seeing some of those guys get in. Not in the fourth quarter, but in the third quarter. When you get guys involved early in the third quarter, you get more guys able to play. You get walk-ons in there. But seeing Rico Scott, one of the guys that we talked about last week, have an opportunity. He hasn't had a lot of opportunities this season, but we heard a lot about him during the spring. We heard a lot about him during the during fall practice, and seeing his performance in that one-handed catch, awesome. I think you got to be excited about the receiver room moving forward because it's very young. You got some really young talent. I mean, first 2 passes Ty Simpson had in the game were to Caleb Odom, and I know we all like seeing that, but good to see a lot of those young guys get some action on Saturday.
Jimmy, any thoughts on Mercer and the talent you got to see? We'll move on from that. I know it was quite the blowout, but still with some guys that I know you followed over the years like we have.
Yeah, I'll talk about one guy that hadn't been mentioned. He just really stood out on one particular snap, but that's all I needed to see because I'd seen him all the way up to this game. He impresses the heck out of me every time. That's Justin Okoronkwo. I think he's going to be a star. I don't think he's just going to be a good player. I think he's going to be a really good player. The fact that he's made this transition to playing in America so quickly, he's fast, he's physical. Again, it was one snap, but man, he made a great run stop on Mercer's last possession. What impressed me is I wasn't even surprised. I was like, God, that kid's good. I think Justin Okoronkwo will make a serious run at one of the inside linebacker spots, assuming Deontay Lawson and Jahad Campbell are in the NFL next spring.
Heading into the college football, obviously every week's got exciting games. Oregon really struggled. I mean, Wisconsin obviously felt they could win that game. They fired their offensive coordinator, right? So they thought that was a big part. Oregon's been on the fence a few times. And again, that goes with when you follow one team, you have people that think nobody else has decommitments but your team. We know that's not true. Shoot, Oklahoma lost 2 yesterday. Ohio State lost 2 yesterday, and 3 days from now, somebody's going to say, hey, we don't lose them. Like, why do we lose them? Ohio State doesn't. But even seeing these games and seeing this every week, I mean, how close Oregon could have 2 losses. They don't, which is the key to being successful, Andrew. And also Texas, quite the battle in Arkansas.
I don't think we're going to know who's really, the cream of the crop until the college football playoffs. I mean, I really don't. You look at you go back and you look at a lot of these schedules and who have a lot of these teams beaten, and they haven't really beat a lot of great opponents. I mean, whether it's Indiana or Ohio State had a great win at Penn State, but how good's Penn State? I mean, I don't know, because they don't have really many good wins on their schedule. I mean, they go up to USC and won, but they don't have really many good wins. Indiana, I don't know if they've beaten a 500 team this year, but they've got a tough one this weekend against Ohio State. Who's Ohio State beaten this year? I mean, it's just it's a weird season, and a lot more about these teams over the course of the next few weeks, because there's some teams that could easily win. I mean, Texas A&M at Auburn, that could be a loss. So a lot still to play for. Texas got to go to Texas A&M. Gonna be an interesting few weeks for a lot of these teams at the top.
I think when you look, hey, we got BYU out of there. Speaking, we've got back-to-back weeks. We got Miami, who skirted a loss for the whole season. BYU's had some definite issues. Finally got them to get off the table. But I mean, it is. The emotions of this. Think about the emotions. Now, the thing I do love about fans and us being fans is they forget their overreaction. But I mean, how many fans were giving Alabama a chance to go into LSU? How many even thinking back to Missouri, I swear Luther Burden was about to shatter every record in that game. I mean, there was legitimate. He's winning the bullet. I don't even know if he played. I mean, I know he played, but it wasn't much. But you get into that, and Georgia's a classic example. Leading into that game, very doubts and all. Now they're saying, hey, we can win it all. It's just an emotional game where some days you're the best team in the country and some Saturdays you're not that good. But Jimmy, give us some thoughts on that Georgia-Tennessee game, which had a feel for all the marbles.
Yeah, I was a little off. I was surprised that Georgia could come off that loss to Ole Miss where I didn't think they played well at all, especially offensively. They sort of looked like a mess. But Saturday, they proved they weren't really a mess. They were just playing on the road in the SEC against a good defense. Got home, played against another good defense, but looked pretty good. And Carson Beck, I thought, had a major back from the grave moment, I think, in that game. I mean, Carson Beck, I think, proved in that game kind of why NFL scouts have been so high on him from the start. But a really impressive performance by a Georgia team. I like what Bone said earlier about how, hey, it might take the playoff to figure out who the best team is. And once we get to the playoff, I don't think any of us should be shocked if that team proves to be Georgia, because they're full of dudes. I think once you get on a neutral field and you're not in these visiting SEC stadiums, it becomes a little more clear as to who the really good teams are. But Tennessee, Georgia, was fun. 2 good teams. I think Tennessee, should they win out, deserves a spot in the playoff too. But Georgia's one of these teams, guys, that I think should not only be in the playoff, they're going to get to the playoff with a good chance to win the playoff. And I'm only going to say that probably about maybe half the teams that are in the field.
I'm not sure anybody's got a good chance of winning that playoff, to be honest. I think everybody's going in. There's a lot of games you got to play to win. That's the crazy part about it. If you're going, you put them in a 4-team playoff like the Final Four. I agree. There's some teams that can get up for 2 games, but having to scheme as much as you do, and I tell you what I thought Georgia did particularly well in that game, is they got the ball out of his hand really quick, because Tennessee's pass rush, I don't think they had a sack, and they might lead the SEC. They're one of the best pressuring front sevens in the college football, and I don't think they even had a sack. You can check me on that. But Andrew Bone, you've got Indiana and Ohio State, and it's 13.5-point favorite. Indiana's rolled the every team who's losing is saying, why didn't we hire Signetti? That's every team. Every message board is, why didn't we hire Signetti? Now, I want to remind you, it wasn't too long ago that every team that was losing was saying, why didn't we hire Mike Norville? He was a very hot name, did a great job at Memphis. Andrew, going into this game, excitement level, you look like not as high as you would think. 2 top 5 teams.
2 top 5 teams, but I mean, Indiana, it sort of has that feel. You guys remember when Alabama played at home against Mississippi State when they were ranked number one. What year was that? 2014-ish?
14.
Yeah.
It was 14, and Dak Prescott was the quarterback, and you just knew that Mississippi State was not the number one team in the country, that they were about to get beat by Alabama, and they did. I kind of feel like that's going to be the case this weekend. Maybe they'll surprise us, but Indiana's got 2 wins on the road this season again, and the 2 wins were against 4 and 6 teams. I just don't know how good they are. We'll know that this weekend, but they do have they have a top 5 offense. They have a top 10 defense. It's going to be an interesting matchup. Ohio State obviously has a top 5 defense as well, so be a good game. But there's a lot of really good players on that Ohio State team, and if they lose this game against Indiana, I mean, what's that going to say about Ryan Day and his future? So
he's going to have a lot of those. He's going to have a lot of those mover flyers in his mailbox. I can assure you. They're just going to say, "Hey,
even a few for sale signs in that."
Yeah,
in that yard. But I just don't see Indiana being able to go into Columbus and win this one.
I really don't know what to expect. Ohio State's had its struggles, certainly had some breaks fall their way against Nebraska. That's my code for the referee screwed up. I was trying to take the high road, but I'm like, you know what? The low road's not as many people down here sometimes. But they, again, Jim, you walk in, you're going to Oklahoma. It's an exciting game. It's exciting because you don't really see this game a whole lot. So I think that's one of the aspects for fans getting to visit. As we discussed earlier in the show, there's a certain amount of respect that goes between 2 programs like this.
Yeah, the funny thing is this is Oklahoma's first year in the SEC, but this really feels like an SEC road game. This is an SEC road game because Oklahoma's got SEC dudes, and they did before they got here, to this league. Defensively, they're good. They have a head coach that's defensive minded who's called good games against Alabama in the past, by the way, when Venables was at Clemson.
We're gonna go called on the Clemson games.
That's also some code. There's some code in there that you can read between the lines, but he called good games for Clemson in the past. This is a new offense for him to face, though. These aren't the Saban offenses. It's a new offense altogether, but it does really feel kind of weird to me. Oklahoma first year in the league, but this feels like a legitimate, tough to win SEC road game. Look, Oklahoma struggled. They're 5-5 overall, but they still have Oklahoma type dudes. A couple of those defenders, Stutzman, the linebacker, the DB Bowen. These are elite guys. And again, they're coached really well on that side of the ball. Now, offensively, they've been a mess. It's going to be very disappointing based on how well Alabama's played defensively if they go into Norman and give up a bunch of points. That's going to be really disappointing if that happened. But I'm predicting sort of a lower scoring game. I don't think Alabama's going to crush them, but I do think that Alabama's a 14-point favorite for a reason. And I'm sort of expecting a low scoring game with Alabama up by a couple of touchdowns.
And later in the week, you will get the Oklahoma-Alabama preview. It will consist Jimmy Stein, Blake Byler, and Charlie Potter will be giving more consistent and more in-depth discussion on this issue with Oklahoma. Andrew, I'm excited because it's Oklahoma. I'm excited because you don't see this game very often. I was excited about Wisconsin for the same reason. We see the same teams every year. We see the same teams year in and year out. But now you're seeing the Texas, the Oklahoma. So what's your excitement factor?
Yeah, I'm excited. You look back on it, and Alabama last played at Oklahoma 24 years ago. And I was at that game, which is crazy. I was a senior in high school and had a chance to go out there with some friends, and heck, it was a close game. I don't think Alabama was expected to win that one, and they went out there and put up one hell of a show. So I'm excited about it. Yeah, I think at the beginning of the season, you look at the schedule and you're like, this is going to be a tough game. This is going to be a tough game. And I thought, man, that road trip to Norman's going to be really tough because we didn't know how good or how bad Oklahoma was going to be going into the season. I think they were projected middle tier, kind of fell below that at this point. They're kind of in that bottom feeder group, but man, they've got nothing to lose this weekend. There's going to be a lot of excitement, a lot of attention. Stadium's going to be loud, but I think Alabama's on a good track, and I'm excited about watching them play again.
We hear that this will be Oklahoma's Super Bowl, Auburn's Super Bowl. I mean, that's nothing That's nothing different for
Everyone's Super
Alabama.
Bowl. I mean,
You
look
think
at Tennessee. They were a top 11 team in the country. The fans still stormed the field after beating Alabama. Every
Yeah,
game,
that's what I was saying.
against Alabama is a Super Bowl for these.
Not
guys.
everybody in the Super Bowl plays well, by the way.
Man, that's damn for sure. But I mean, Georgia, it's not like Georgia said, "Hey, it's just Bama. We got Texas later on. We're just gonna go here." I mean, it's everybody. Everybody's giving their best effort when you're at that level. So I don't worry. And they're throwing out all the stops. Look, you're not about to be struggling and faking 8 punts and getting your ass kicked at home. I mean, that's a good way to get fired. There's still some want to show some future, Jimmy, on what this team can do for Oklahoma. They still got recruits they'll have on campus, so that's probably where they're turning their attention also. Well, let's turn our attention to basketball. Really rough stretch.
You got more recruits going to Norman to see Alabama maybe than to see Oklahoma.
That's not good for Venables, but we got basketball coming up. We got Illinois tomorrow night. It's a game I'm going to go to. Tough Purdue loss, good basketball team. I think we'll see how good they are down the road. But going forward, Jimmy, just give me a thought on the basketball team this stretch. I mean, it's one of 6 games. Purdue was to really test this team, and again for Nate to figure out what he's got on his hands.
Well, I mean, you find out exactly where you are. I think there's a lot of value in that. A road loss to a top-ranked team does not ding you in the eyes of the committee at all. By the way, the basketball committee does a much better job of this than the football committee. That's another subject. But the basketball committee is not going to really hold that against Alabama. It's just a great way to evaluate exactly where you are and what needs to be worked on. If you were crushing teams by 60 all the way through the non-conference, you get to the SEC games, then all of a sudden you find out you're not really good in a couple of areas and it's news to you. That's not a good situation at all. I think Nate Oates schedules very smartly, knowing that he's got a really good team. If you didn't have a really good team, the schedule would be dumb. But he's got a really good team, so you use these games as a barometer. I think Illinois is another barometer game, but they're in a neutral side. If you want to call Birmingham neutral, this is a more winnable game, for lack of a better term. I expect Alabama to play better and look a little better against Illinois because Purdue's just really tough, especially in their gym.
Yeah, I got a couple of I quote my friends a lot. I know a lot of stupid people, and they watch this show, and they know my friends that are stupid are so stupid they literally know I'm talking about them right now. The smart ones have no idea if I'm referring to them, but they all like Purdue. When they see these teams like Purdue, it takes them a while to figure out they're good. Again, I'm going to mention it till the cows come home, but that 2022 panic about losing to UConn, that was quite a night on the round table for us. There was a lot of holy crap, we just got drubbed by an unranked UConn team, and I was like, I feel like they should be ranked. You know what I mean? They're like, I was looking like, why aren't they ranked? The coach and all. Well, Jimmy, we appreciate you. You can find Jimmy Stein on the BamaOnLine.com and on the roundtable, where he's an active participant. We're no telling what we're discussing this morning, but we are discussing something. Jimmy, we'll see you later on the week in the preview show. I almost forgot the name. So looking forward to it, Jimmy, and talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot, guys. See y'all soon.
See you, man.
And then it was just us, finally.
It's like the Highlander. There can only be one, though. There can only be one.
All right.
So Joseph, for those used to seeing Joseph Hastings with us, he has gone to the dentist. He's one of those guys, I think, that is scared of the dentist and waits till he absolutely has to go based on that.
They give him a list. Here's all the times you can come. He's like, Tuesday, 9 a.m. Perfect. That's awesome.
Literally, the only thing we have consistent, we have 2 things, the post-game show and this. I just don't think Joseph could wait any longer. I hope right now they're like cutting in his gums and pulling teeth out, because he said something about his wisdom teeth. Anyways, thank you. Let's get to recruiting. It's been a busy week. 3 decommitments. Dawson Merritt has flipped to Nebraska. Caleb Cunningham has flipped to Ole Miss, and Anthony Rogers, and this was expected. He was committed to the Saban staff, has flipped to Ohio State. But Andrew, huge get last night. One we've been kind of waiting on. Ivan Taylor, Bama, 3rd time's the charm, right? They missed on him the first time he went to Notre Dame. They missed on him the second time he went to Michigan. But finally, and in classic Ivan Taylor fashion, he just did it all crazy. He just changed his Instagram, and then he just dropped his own edit. Then Hayes Fawcett had to drop an edit later. But Andrew, something we've been waiting on.
Yeah, recruiting's a marathon, not a sprint. You got to wait until the end. There's a lot of moving parts all the way until the finish line. You just never know how things might unfold. And with Ivan Taylor, this is a guy that committed to Notre Dame earlier this year. Came to Tuscaloosa back in the spring, very quietly. Didn't really tell anybody that he was coming to campus. Made the trip, and then we kind of found out a little bit later that he had made the visit as a Notre Dame commitment, and there was some heavy talk that he was going to flip to Alabama during the summer. Came in for an official visit. Everything was trending in that direction, but then he takes the visit to Michigan, and Michigan pulls ahead. Commits to Michigan this summer, but Alabama kept recruiting him, kept pursuing, came in for the Georgia game, had a great weekend, and ball started moving in the right direction. His father, Ike Taylor, two-time Super Bowl winner with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We knew that he was definitely on board with Alabama, but they really needed to come back to Tuscaloosa, or not necessarily come back to Tuscaloosa. We wanted to see if they were going to go back to Ann Arbor, which they did. And after that visit to Ann Arbor, came back, said, still kind of torn, wasn't sure what he was going to do, was going to make a final decision a little bit down the road. I think that had to have worried Michigan a lot, not being able to get him to shut things down after that trip. And things really moved in Alabama's direction. And getting a safety on board was certainly a top priority for Alabama because they didn't have any safeties in the class a week ago, or excuse me, 48 hours ago. And now they do. And it's one of the best ones in the country.
One of the things I think some people are having trouble understanding is like when a coaching staff only goes after how many safeties? 3, 4 in this whole class? Is that how many they recruited? You look at Derek Smith, who's expected to play wide receiver. So even if he goes to college, and Bama would have took him as a wide receiver, I think. But even if he goes to college, he doesn't help your safety positions. But it wasn't as urgent as I think fans thought, because you're used to seeing 2 or 3, DBs, safeties in that group, but obviously not a huge priority if they were only recruiting a few. But Andrew, it's very important to get the right one, right?
Yeah, it is. And Alabama recruited secondary really well last year. And you look at a guy like Zay Mincy, who's moved over to safety, because of some injuries. But I think that he could potentially find a home there. And so you got a really great young core of defensive backs from the freshman class that was signed last year. We're seeing all those freshmen that are playing this year, but the group that they've got right now with Dejon Lee, Chuck McDonald, now Ivan Taylor, I mean, that is a terrific haul for Alabama, and getting the right safety was important, as you mentioned. And they didn't really pursue other guys. There was 3 or 4 guys that they brought in. And once they kind of figured out that they were in it with Taylor, they didn't push for anybody else. And Anquan Fagans is a guy that they've continued to recruit a little bit, but their main focus this season has really been on trying to flip Ivan Taylor, and they stayed the course, and they were able to do that.
Yeah, let's go to the rankings. Keelan Russell, finally, the 3-star SMU commitment that some Alabama fans were pretty upset with Alabama committing, which is, they won't remember it this time next year that they were, but there were some people upset about taking him, right, Andrew, having to flip an SMU commitment. And here he is, number 3 in the country. That's not just at On 3. That is the industry ranking. I think everybody's got him at 3. ESPN has him at 14, but obviously an elite talent with the stats. 45 touchdowns, no interceptions, completing 70% of the passes. It's almost like, get the hell out of here. He's that good.
Everybody used to see, a lot of people were saying, he's only good because of his teammate DeCoria Moore. And now he's ranked ahead of his teammate DeCoria Moore in all the rankings. So, I mean, Keelan's been awesome. I mean, had a great spring as far as 7-on-7 camps, then went into the summer, won the Elite 11. I mean, what more did he have to prove? And then he goes into the season and has just had a ridiculous season for one of the top high school football programs in America. I think they're ranked number 2 overall in the high school football rankings. But, man, I think he's really going to challenge Bryce Underwood for that top overall spot in postseason All-Star games. He's just a tremendous talent. And, the good thing about Keelan is he has really kind of shut things down. He hasn't really talked. Some other schools tried to get in on him late, including Colorado, but he didn't take any other visits. Is really locked in, and seems to be really excited about his future in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, and speaking of Colorado, Michael Carroll took a visit out there, and I think it's like the panic. Of course, people are trying to flip Alabama's class. It's number 2 in the country. People in Alabama's class. Alabama's bringing on guys committed to other schools, so they're trying to flip. It's just flip season. I mean, that's exactly what it is. But Michael, as a player, got his due at number 9 in the country, and obviously one of our favorite, Jackson Lloyd, up to 20, and I'm still not sure that's quite high enough because
Right.
his upside for Jackson finally focusing on football seems to be absurdly high.
And Jackson been starting on both sides of football this year, not only on offense, but also been making some big plays on the defensive line. But yeah, I mean these are 2 outstanding offensive linemen. Mike Carroll has been so impressive at IMG this season, and I think that Jackson Lloyd starting to get that recognition. I mean, we remember when he first got offered back in January, he was the first offensive player in the 25 class to get an offer from Coach DeBoer and the staff. And a lot of that is because they knew him from being at Washington. Washington had offered him last year. But a lot of people were talking about him just being a 3-star. Now I think every single website in the country has him in the top 100. I think the top 3 sites have him, in the top 60, and On3 was really ahead of the curve. So shout out to them for having him in that top 100 early, and he's continued to climb, and now in that 20 spot. So, updated rankings. We'll see another update in January after All-Star games. But man, I got to give one shout out to Lotzir Brooks, moving on up to number 73 in the country, having an unbelievable season at Millville High School in New Jersey, state record holder for receiving yards and touchdowns. That was that's a guy that has continued to climb in the rankings as well. And number 73 overall, that kind of solidifies him as a top 100 prospect.
And again, when Alabama, there was some pretty upset people when Alabama was recruiting all these 3-stars. I mean, Brooks was one. Keelan was one, which is amazing to this day that Keelan was one. And then Jackson Lloyd, there's a lot of questions about. But again, this staff has proven it knows how to build relationships. It knows how to evaluate, especially what they're looking for. There's guys they're going to walk away from. And then to factor it all in, NIL has to factor in. It's still hard. The whole write them a blank check is not happening. That's not. And I remember, I mean, there was a lot of written blank.
Not here.
No, well, there's not. I don't know if anybody does it, but the whole write a blank check fever got going with T-Rob when he was leaving. Just write him a blank check, give him the keys, give him the keys and all. I think there's an overreaction to the big plan, the big scheme of that. Andrew, 2 official visitors this week. Jace Clarizio and Nashawn Montgomery, both committed to others.
I said that so confident, like I knew that's.
I don't think it's even close to right. I'll be honest. It sounds like people that say Nacho Belgrande, like they're speaking Spanish when that's clearly American.
We're going with it.
Yeah, we're in it now. Once you say it, it's locked in. But 2 visitors coming in, and again, people griping that people are trying to, upset Bama's, people are trying to flip Bama's commitment. Here's a Florida commitment and a Michigan State commitment on campus.
Yeah, I think with Jace Clarizio, this is a kid that, Alabama has known about for a while. They just offered him about a week ago, last Wednesday to be exact, but has a relationship with the Alabama offensive line coach, Chris Kapilovich, who recruited him at Michigan State. He was offered last year by Michigan State and is a Michigan State legacy. I mean, his father was a running back there in the late 80s, was actually recruited by Nick Saban, which is pretty wild when Nick Saban was on the defensive staff for the Spartans. But Nate made his first trip to Alabama this past weekend. Joseph Hastings, JoJo has a great interview with Jace on BOL right now, so go check that out. But this is a kid that we're going to continue to kind of monitor over the next few weeks. I think Alabama would like to add one more running back to this class, and that's a guy that they've extended an offer to, has a committable offer. Now, when you extend these offers kind of late, you want to bring them in, kind of meet with them, sit down with them, get to know them a little bit better. Even though Coach Cap knew them, the rest of the coaching staff had never met them in person. So they wanted to sit down, get a chance to evaluate them off the field. And I think everything went well, and that's a guy that they're going to continue to pursue moving forward and see how things shake out.
Yeah, Harry Dalton, the USC commitment from Virginia, is another running back Alabama's looking at. Very quiet, but I think it's important. They don't feel they have to sign another running back, but they would like to if it's the right one, obviously. And they think, and again, Jace hasn't put out senior film, but I went and watched a few of his games. He's a good football player. He looks bigger, more improved. He's very natural running the ball. Looks better than he did as a junior. And again, I think he told you, Andrew, that he was going to wait to put it out after his senior year, maybe.
Yeah,
Pace.
I think they're still in season. He said, highlights won't come out until after the year's over. I think he has to put it together himself. So we'll have some highlights later on, but will it be as a Alabama signing or Michigan State signing? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, wide receiver is another one. Nashawn Montgomery comes in. He's pretty familiar with Alabama. And the thing towards this stretch, what have we got? 2 weeks and a day. It is really, really going back and forth, jockey. And I was mentioning this. I know you remember it last year. Jaden Baugh.
Yep.
Jaden Baugh was committed to Florida on a Sunday. He committed to Alabama on a Monday. He went back to Florida. This wasn't public, but it is exactly what he was doing. On Monday, he was committed to Alabama. On Tuesday, before signing day, or was that, it might have been a week before, he was committed to Florida. At some point, the NIL decisions factor in. So all that stuff's still being worked out. Andrew, another quiet prospect who's been on campus several times, Mason Dunn. Very quiet. There's a few super quiet. Harry's quiet. Caleb Evers, the commitment's quiet. Mason's right there with him in the quiet tree.
Yeah, four-star cornerback from Tupelo, a kid that's been to Tuscaloosa 3 times now. Got the offer earlier this season when he came in for the Western Kentucky game, came back for an official for the Georgia game, and then snuck back in for the Mercer game this weekend. And I think this past weekend was probably more important than even the other 2 weekends because Alabama wasn't sure if he was going to be coming in or not. He's been really quiet. Ole Miss is obviously having great season. Had he completely shut it down, or was he still very much interested in coming back to Tuscaloosa for the Mercer game? Definitely continues to show high interest. His mom came with him, and this is a guy that Alabama has continued to pursue. Now, can they get him out of state? Mississippi, as we know, has always been a tough place to recruit. We saw Caleb flip to Ole Miss last week. Does that momentum really help them with Mason Dunn? I don't know, but I think that Alabama's got a realistic shot with Dunn. They're going to continue to pursue, and he's really the only cornerback that I think they still got a chance with. I think Donovan Starr is committed to Auburn. I think probably on the outside looking in, with him right now. So I think a lot of eyes are still on Mason Dunn, and if he comes back for that Auburn game next week, you never know. We might be inclined to say Alabama's in the driver's seat. So we'll see if he makes it back to Tuscaloosa for the Iron Bowl.
Another frequent visitor to the capstone, and I don't think he gets nearly enough attention as some of his counterparts, but AK Deer, monster running back. He's literally that type that Burton Burns used to keep in his pocket nonstop. Very nice player, Mississippi guy, shows up. Look, anybody will come to the Georgia game, right? Anybody will come. A lot will come to the Iron Bowl, but when you show up for Mercer, South Florida, when you show up for those kind of games, that's a certain kind of fandom that kind of leads you to think that they did a really good job with him, especially Robert Gillespie, who's known for building relationships.
Yeah, I mean, you see in-state guys come in for these type of games, and what's wild is we didn't really see any. We saw one pretty big 26 in-state guy in town, but none of the in-state commitments were even in for the Mercer game. From 25 and the 27 class, but AK Deer and Luke Metz both getting back to Tuscaloosa. AK, I think he's been to almost every single home game this season, and when he flipped, I'm gonna call it a flip, even though it took him a month to.
No, it's a flip. It's definitely a flip.
From Ole Miss to Alabama. There was the day he committed to Alabama officially. There were reports on the Ole Miss sites that it wouldn't last. That he was going to end up flipping. He would be back in Oxford throughout the season, and he was going to flip. Now they said the same thing about Caleb Cunningham, and to their credit, he did flip, but AK Deer's never gone back to Oxford since his decommitment. Everybody thought he was going to be in Oxford for that Georgia game just because it was such a big game. Had no care in the world to go to that game. Stayed at home. He was back in Tuscaloosa for the Mercer game, and he's really shut down his recruitment. Has really been a big recruiter for Alabama, kind of behind the scenes, and having a really good senior season. So I think that's a great get out of state that a lot of people don't talk about, because he's he's just been pretty quiet with his recruitment and hasn't gone anywhere else. So you hadn't really had to worry about him.
We've talked, like, I know everybody wants the number 1 class, number 2, number 3, but the difference between these classes was never on more display than last night. Alabama rankings, and then there's something else to factor. The rankings, the final player rankings affect the team ranking. Guys go up and down and affect the score and all that. But last night, Alabama dropped to 5. Yesterday afternoon, dropped to 5. There was a mini meltdown that they dropped to 5. 7 p.m., they get Ivan Taylor, and they shoot up to number 2. That should tell you, and Ivan's a good player, but that's what a fine line there is between 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And Ohio State, I think, is going to lose a couple of guys. Everybody's losing a couple of guys. Everybody's getting a couple of guys. But Andrew, give us a final thought before we get out of here on this class. 2 weeks to go, 2 weeks in a day. Give us one final thought.
Yeah, 15 days. I mean, you want to, you want kids to, shut things down. You want to win these, remaining recruiting battles, but there's still a lot going on behind the scenes. Still a lot of NIL pitches happening, but I think Alabama's in a great spot. They've got an unbelievable class. You got to be excited about. A lot of these guys coming in early because it's a big group. It's going to be arriving early. We talked to Dejon Lee the other day, 5-star cornerback who lost in his playoff game, but that kind of opened up the door for him to return to Tuscaloosa for the Iron Bowl rather than going to Texas A&M for the Texas game as he had originally planned. So it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks, but I think Alabama's going to be just fine, and we're going to have a lot of great coverage on BOL really over the course of the next 2 weekends, because that's really when everything's going to be happening.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of excitement. I mean, anytime a kid puts out an eye emoji alone, that'll send grown-ups scurrying, on Twitter. I mean, those 2 eye emojis, whoever invented that's a cruel human being. I'm going to kick him in the cods when I see him. But, yeah, a lot of excitement, people trying to read in. And, again, Ivan Taylor putting the cherry on top of weird commitments last night, just flipping his Instagram page with no photos, it didn't look like. It had just flipped his Instagram page to Bama, and then – everybody goes in a scramble. He tweets out he had committed. Pretty nice deal. And
yeah, I don't think I've seen that before. I don't think I've seen somebody change their bio.
No, not first. Not first. Yeah.
Before they put out a tweet. I mean, because it didn't happen right away. It happened like who knows how long it had been up there. But when we first noticed it after it had made its way to the BOL roundtable, it was still another 15, 20 minutes before the commitment actually, or he actually tweeted it out. So that was fun.
I think he should have put out the tweet, then changed the Instagram. That's kind of and Ivan should know how to commit. This is his 3rd one. But, I mean, Ivan's a different bird, still playing in the playoffs. Had struggled a little bit with making this decision known. I mean, at one point we were told it was possible he would just show up in Tuscaloosa, which would have drove us, we'd have had a lot of questions to answer for the next few weeks. But anyways, Andrew Bone, we will see you on the post-game show, and maybe some breaking news or something pops up on recruiting. But as always, appreciate everybody joining in to watch us. Give us a thumbs up. Look at Andrew's weird thumb. It's begging for you to like it. Something's wrong with that thumb, but that's not normal. And we appreciate y'all for being here, and we look forward to seeing you on Bama Online. Say goodbye, Andrew.
Goodbye, guys. Thank y'all for watching.